Welcome to the workshop number 3, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting close to the last month or so of this process, and it's been a very, very fun process and a very learning experience for myself and many others. So I thank all of you for being here. For those of you who still find time to be able to spend time here with us going through these projects. As the mayor of this great city, I can't even really describe the feeling that I get just seeing how far along we've come. And you know, I want to give a special shout out and thanks to my colleagues on the council, those that are here, Councilperson Agudelo and Councilwoman Patricia Riley, our city manager Andy Stewart, and Jean Friedman also, who's the staff of our city of Peekskill. And she's been vital in this process and making things happen. So I thank all of you for all of the hard work that you're doing, and to everybody who submitted projects so we can see the shape of the future of Peekskill by so many different perceptions is amazing. So I thank you all for being here this evening, and we're going to get on with the show. So I'm going to pass it over to our partner, Susan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and like the mayor said, that you stuck to the end. So thank you for that. Thanks for all your time. So buenas noches. Este es el último taller público del proceso Peekskill DRI. Tenemos copias de la presentación en español. Cristina les va a dar más detalles.
Buenas noches a todos. Gracias por acompañarnos al último taller público del Peekskill DRI. Si necesitan asistencia a traducir la presentación esta noche, yo voy a estar aquí a ayudarlos. Y también tenemos copias de la presentación en español en el frente. Aquí les puedo dar. Y ya.
So Christine just said that we have translation assistance available if anybody needs it, and we have copies of the presentation in Spanish out front. We will be doing a report of this workshop that will be posted on the website shortly when we can finish it, and that will be available in English and Spanish as well. So without further ado, I'll just get started. This is going to be brief, and then we will have time for a question and answer session, just wide open, any questions that you all have. So this is our committee that's been working very hard on this process. They've had monthly meetings, and at this time I'd like to actually ask everybody to stand who's on the committee so we can acknowledge, you know, all the time that they put into this effort. It really has been a great effort on their part.
You too, Joe.
So thanks. They've been an invaluable resource to us, and there's still one more meeting, guys, so the work is not yet done. We also have some folks from the state. I don't think any of them are with us tonight, but they have also been very much involved in this process. We have weekly calls, which they're on, and so they've been guiding us throughout the process. In particular, Dave Ashton from the Department of State, Elizabeth Bangle from the Department of Homes and Community Renewal, and Megan Taylor and Eric Warren from Empire State Development. They're really kind of our go-to guys and ladies at the state. On our team, we have myself, Susan Favati, Simon Cates, Christine Jimenez. Some of you may have seen Taylor Young, our colleague, at past meetings. He's taking his parental leave right now. He has a new baby at home, so we're happy that he's taking advantage of that wonderful new state program, which is fantastic. So we wish him well. He's busy right now. Just a refresher, I think most of you have participated in this process, so you have a little bit of a sense of you know, the program overall, but some of you might be new to it tonight. So basically, what is the DRI? It is a state program now in its 4th round, instituted by Governor Cuomo, in which each of the 10 regional economic development councils of the state, and they're shown on the map there, one in each region is selected for $10 million in funding. Basically to come up with a series of projects and ideas to transform the local downtown economy. Each plan is supposed to identify very specific projects in terms of their costs, their scope, what the anticipated revitalization benefits are, so that the state can then select from that menu that are in the plan and select the ones that are going to be most transformative for the city. So what goes into a DRI plan? Well, there's 3 main components. There's the downtown vision, which is actually on this board up front. That was developed fairly early on in the process. We worked with the local planning committee. We used the city's application that they made to the state as a guide, and it's really meant to be you know, a guiding set of themes for the DRI plan. The next part of the plan is the goals and strategies. There are 5 goals that organize the plan, and that's how these boards around the room are grouped. and they're really kind of the thematic way to organize the projects. And then within each goal, there's a set of strategies, and ideally the projects should be furthering both the strategies and the goals. And then the last piece is really the meat of the plan, which is the actual projects. So when you pick up the future plan that we will be working very hard on the next month, the biggest part of that plan is going to be the project profiles. All the details in terms of graphics, in terms of logistics, who's responsible, what's the time frame, all of that will be in that section of the plan. So it's really the most important part of the plan. So where we are in the overall process, back in the summer, the state selected each of the 10 downtown revitalization communities. Peekskill was the one awarded in the Mid-Hudson region. And then we kind of got started late in the summer, early fall. There was the selection of the local planning committee, and they started their work. So where we are right now is in that sort of darker blue, or I guess medium blue, phase that really ran through from September and will be running through the end of March. That is our drop-dead deadline for completion of the DRI plan, and then it gets submitted to the state in March 31st. But the process doesn't end there. After that, the state will look at the plan, make their determination, make the choices of which projects will be funded. Generally, they make that announcement sometime in the summer. That's been the experience in past rounds, June or July generally. And then in the fall, the state will start the process of implementation. They'll start contracting with the city if it's a public project, or the project sponsor if it's a privately sponsored project. And in our experience, that process can run basically into the end of this year, maybe even early next. And then the implementation side of it can take a couple years really to start to see kind of the boots on the ground, the buildings coming up, the improvements being made. So be patient, it will happen. It's not an overnight flip of the switch, but it's a couple years process, and it's very rewarding to see. But that's just kind of giving you an oversight of what you can expect in the next year or two. Our process that we've been involved with in this past 6-month period is the plan itself. So as you can see, we are nearing the end of that process. We are, as the mayor said, in our final month. This is the final public workshop. There is one more local planning committee meeting next month, March 18th, back at the library where we've held all of the other committee meetings. And then there is also a survey that is live and active now. I think a lot of you may have taken it online. We have computers in the back if you want to take it tonight. We also have hard copies available here tonight. There are additional hard copies, I believe, available at the library and City Hall. And that survey will be running through March 13th. So please, if you haven't taken it, it only takes about a few minutes. We'll get into that, 12 minutes. I'm stealing his thunder. Doesn't take very long. It's really helpful to us, not only to see how the projects are shaping up in terms of the support, but what are the comments? What do people think about the details of the projects? That's all very helpful. So please tell your friends to take it too. Just a reminder of what the DRI area is in terms of the overall boundary. It does include where we are right now, the sort of downtown core of Peekskill, and then it also includes the waterfront area, basically down to Fleischman Pier, and running along in between the downtown and the waterfront along Central and South. So that's the overall area, and all of the projects that are in the plan need to be in that boundary in order to be considered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Simon for details.
Great, thank you, Susan. Thank you all again for being here tonight and for staying involved throughout this process. As we've mentioned multiple times at these meetings, we really need all of your input. The local planning committee really needs all of your input in order to know what the top priorities are here for the city of Peekskill. So Susan has left me with the hard part. This slide is really about the criteria that the committee has been looking at, that we've been looking at, and that the state is going to look at when they evaluate whether these projects are eligible and are really strong DRI projects. And this is a slide that we showed at the last planning committee as well. They're the same criteria that we've been talking about throughout the process at prior public workshops, with a little twist. And the twist here is thinking about these criteria in terms of a two-step screening process. And the reason that we started thinking about it like that with the committee is to help all of us get a sense of which projects are really going to be the strongest as DRI projects, right? There might be a project that has a lot of public support, is cost-effective, has a lot of additional benefits, is really a great project that everybody would like to see. But this first screening step here is is an important step along the way for us understanding and for the committee understanding if a project is likely to get DRI funding from the state. And that first screening step is really, is the project ready? Is it feasible, right? If it's requiring other funding sources, are those other funding sources lined up, right? If there is, does the project have control, or does the project sponsor have control of their site, or are there questions about that, or is there a risk that that site control might be an issue, that might fall through? Is it a project sponsor that doesn't have a lot of experience? Is there a concern about whether the sponsor is going to be able to sustain the project on an ongoing basis? Those are incredibly important considerations. It's not a question of whether it's a good project. It's about whether the state's going to view it as something that's going to be successful. It's also got to be ready to start in the short term. It's another thing that we've seen in other communities where there were critical projects, but they were 4 or 5 years down the road. And from the state standpoint, that's not strong as a DRI project. It's got to be ready to go in the short term. So this is a really a critical set of criteria. It's how the committee has been reviewing these projects. It's what we are charged to do as consultants with the state in order to help develop these projects in a way that they're as strong as possible, so that when we send up that plan to the state on March 31st, there's no risk, right? Whoever's reviewing the plan from the state just has to fund all these projects. So that's what we're trying to do with all the projects that are in the DRI plan. The other thing, though, is that there are different types of sort of categories of projects that we can include in the plan. What everyone's really focused on the most are the ones on top here. Projects that are recommended for DRI funding. Those are the projects that are going to go into the plan that the local planning committee is saying, this is what we want to spend our $10 million on. However, what we've done in the past and what the state encourages us to do is to also include projects that, for one reason or another, aren't quite ideal as DRI projects. Maybe they're not quite ready. Maybe they're not eligible for DRI funding. But they're high priorities for the community. And these are projects that we can include in a section of projects recommended for other funding sources. And the reason to do this is because when the state is looking, is evaluating projects for other funding sources in the future, other grant sources, they'll look at your DRI plan. And if a project is in that category, they may score it more highly. They might give it more support for some other funding source. So it's a nice way for us to say, look, the committee's got a hard job, right? There's only a certain amount of money to allocate here. We've got more than $10 million worth of projects around the room tonight. And so when they have that hard decision of trimming that list down, it's a positive message to say there's another way that we can get some of these projects funded. Just an update or a reminder of all the public outreach that we've done throughout the process. It's been great to hear from all of you, folks who have come to the local planning committee and spoken at the end during public comments, hearing from the committee themselves. As Susan mentioned, this is our third public workshop that we've had. We had a public meeting in Spanish as well as at the Church of the Assumption. Very early on in the process, we had a couple of pop-up events to get input, to hear from people where they were at the Farmers Market, the Harvest Fest, and the Saturday Academy. We had stakeholder interviews. We had the open call for projects. We had the Business Owners Roundtable back on February 6th. The public survey, which I'll talk about on the next slide, is open right now. And of course, we've got our website providing additional information and social media throughout the process. Okay, so the public survey, the website link is up here. We sent out an e-blast today and also on Friday with some information about the survey. When we left the office around 2 o'clock, or when we started printing stuff around 2 o'clock, we had 288 responses. I think we're probably closer to 300 now. That's a pretty good response in just a handful of days. This has only been open since Friday. We would love to see a few hundred more, right? So do whatever you can to help us get the word out about the survey. It's taking people about 12 minutes to complete it so far. That's what SurveyMonkey's telling us. So some people are taking a little bit longer. Some people are getting through it more quickly. So it's not going to take you all day. It's in both English and Spanish online. We've got, as Susan mentioned, we have hard copies in the back tonight. If you don't want to take it online, there's also hard copies at City Hall and at the library. And we've got laptops in the back of the room to take the survey tonight online. And so finally, some next steps, sort of what's going to happen in the next 5 weeks or so. So first of all, the survey, once again, final plug, please take it. There's a final LPC meeting, Local Planning Committee meeting on March 18th. If you look around the room tonight, if you were to add up the DRI request on the boards tonight, it's about $15.5 million. What that means is that there are some final decisions to be made by the Local Planning Committee. That's all going to happen at that meeting on March 18th. Then we've sort of got the last couple of weeks of the month to finalize that plan. And we've got to pull it all together. We've got to make all of the projects that are in the plan as strong as possible before we send that plan up to the state on March 31st. And as Susan mentioned, then there's a final announcement by the state sometime over the summer about which projects are going to be receiving DRI funding. And this is just our last slide before we open it up to Q&A. We'll leave this up so that the website's here and the SurveyMonkey link is here as well. I guess I'll do one more plug. Please take the survey. Any last comments? So with that, Christine and I will help sort of run around with the mic, and we want to hear from you. If you've got comments about the projects that you've seen on the boards tonight, if you've got questions, we can try to help answer them. But we want to take as much time as you all want and hear what you all have to say. So.
Does anyone need Spanish translation, Espanol? Anybody? Okay, because we would have done English and Spanish in the Q&A, but if no one is physically here who needs Spanish, then we'll stick to English and we'll have the summary in English and Spanish. So that's good. Okay. Anybody have questions?
Should be on, yeah. Test, yep.
Okay, thank you for clarifying the email that I got last night from you guys, which was kind of disturbing. But at any rate, thank you for your assistant. But at any rate, though, yeah, I got an email from Susan last night concerning our project. Okay. All right. So my question is, in the grant, you guys stated that you would give more priority to people who had a match, you know, that they could show some type of, you know, more of a match. And so I looked through, all of the projects are really good, but I just want to say that some of the projects, including the city, they didn't show a match. So I think if you all stick to what you said in the grant, that people should show a match, that would help to reduce things down to the projects that are showing the match with the bank financing.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, one thing that we've talked about along the way is that for private projects with a private project sponsor, it's important that somebody has, you know, has skin in the game, right? They're not getting a handout from the state. It's a little different for public projects, right? When public funds are being used for a city-sponsored, a publicly sponsored project, you know, the state's view and the local planning committee's view here is that there's more flexibility for state funds to be used, you know, without a private match when it's a public project. So that's the difference there.
Yeah, and every project is sort of looked at on its own, on its merits. So as Simon mentioned, obviously it's good to have skin in the game. It's good to have leverage from a private sponsor, but every project is going to be different. And so it really just depends. I mean, that there are no hard and fast rules, but we like to see some skin in the game, but it's going to vary project to project. So no two are alike.
Other questions, comments?
I'm not sure whether, I think I heard you say that there is room for other ideas that might entail other funding coming in. Was that? Because I had this idea that I read something recently about a company called a business called Unboxed, where people, it's like a big grocery store kind of place, but you bring your containers to the place. It's it works with the idea of sustainability and et cetera, et cetera. And I had this idea that it could be kind of an interesting business to have in Peekskill, because there really isn't anything like it, and it's sort of in other places I've seen, it's kind of a large facility. Sorry. In other places I've seen it's a fairly large facility. I think it could provide jobs for people. And I was also thinking it could be kind of cool if it was situated down by the train station so that people could go to their local train station, ride to Peekskill, shop there. Maybe there could even be a delivery service that would bring your stuff to the train for you. And then you could take the train back to your town and, you know, have less of a carbon footprint in that way, too. It's just an idea, you know. I ran it by my brother, who's a chef, and he said, that sounds like a good idea. So I don't know. I don't know whether, you know, that's completely irrelevant at this point, but I just wanted to raise it as a possible, you know, something that would make Peekskill stand out as having this, you know, sort of a natural food place, but on a big scale, and the sustainability thing.
Let me clarify just a couple of things, because I think what you're referring to is when I was on the slide about projects recommended for DRI funding versus projects recommended for other funding sources.
Yeah, it could be.
And what that's about is, you know, projects that have sort of come up through the process that didn't make the cut for one reason or another, but still have public support. Right, and we can put them in the plan, and hopefully that gives them a boost in trying to get other state funds. With regard to the specific project, type of project that you're talking about, this is something that we've come up against in DRI plans in the past, and it's come up here too, where it's a great idea. Who's going to do it, right? There's got to be a project sponsor who's going to receive the funds, and that ends up being a stumbling block a lot of the time in DRI, because it's such a short time frame to try to put all those pieces together. It seems like a great idea. I think it would be tricky to kind of squeeze into the plan in the last month or so. Okay. I like the idea. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Right behind you.
A question that's come up from multiple people. I'll stand up. Hey, John Sharp. Nice to see you guys. You guys obviously, along with the committee, recommend projects going to the state. They go into the state picks them. How does the money get assimilated once the state decides what projects? Is it a blanket check? Is it, how does that process work? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they drop an envelope off at night.
Exactly, that's what I'm asking. Would you write me a check?
Yeah. So the answer is that it depends on the project, and it depends on which state agency is funding it. So we can get into the details, you know, specifically about the RIDE project and how that would work.
And it's not just about the RIDE.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, so big picture, if it's a large development project, chances are it's going to be, well, the funds tend to be reimbursable. So if it's a large development project, you know, someone who has a lot of capital resources, chances are what's going to happen is that that project sponsor is going to have to outlay funds, demonstrate that they've outlaid the funds, and then they'll get reimbursed. Now, for a lot of smaller property owners, you know, if it's a small renovation, if it's someone who doesn't have, you know, substantial resources,
the RIDE.
So or if it's sort of a non-traditional type of project, right? There are other scenarios where it might be that a straightforward example is if it's a facade improvement or a small building renovation. The project sponsor is going to have to demonstrate that they've got an invoice from a contractor, but then they can get reimbursed before they pay their contractor. So there's a way to make it easier for a smaller property owner who doesn't have substantial resources. For the RIDE project, it's a little more non-traditional, so we'll have to talk about it with DUS and kind of figure out how, what the stream would be.
Thank you.
But also big picture, it's whatever state agency, and it's generally either ESD or HCR, Homes and Community Renewal, whatever jurisdiction it falls under is going to be contracting individually with that project sponsor. And there are going to be requirements. I know that there are MWBE requirements, minority, women, business enterprise contracting requirements for all DRI projects, whether they're public or private. And then the city will also be contracting with the state sort of separately on public projects. So that's kind of what that process from summer through the end of the year is all about, is the contracting project process.
Hi, I'm curious about the specifics of the Fleischman's Pier project. It doesn't, you don't mention it in the description over here, but there was talk about tour boats being invited to visit Peekskill. Is there a commitment from any tour company to commit to visit Peekskill?
So I'll answer half of that question, and then I might get some more information from Gene over here for the second half. So the first half is that that project is sort of broken down into two phases. And phase one has already received funding from New York State. That's for about $2 million. That's already received funding, and that's the part of the project that would accommodate the tour boats. So if where your mind is going is, should we fund this if the tour boats aren't locked up, the tour boat part of the project is already funded, right? So the DRI part of the project is for, it's a floating dock that would allow smaller craft to also use that dock. It's improvements to the park, and it's expansion of the parking lot to accommodate more activity down there. As for the question about whether tour boats have already been secured, I don't know the answer to that, so.
Hi, thank you for your question. As part of the original application that we had submitted, the city had submitted to obtain the $2 million, we had to show that there would be some demand from private tour boat companies for this type of dock. So we did reach out to quite a number of different tour boats, and we did get interest. They weren't obviously going to sign on the dotted line, not knowing whether we were even going to build a pier at that point, but definitely some strong interest. So as soon as we start in on the project to start construction, which will take quite a while to build this pier, obviously, we will quickly reach out to these companies as well as others to obtain strong commitments, and I believe there will be quite strong commitment from companies.
Thank you.
I just have a question in terms of the logistics in putting in a proposal, whether it's important or helpful in bringing a proposal to the state, whether there is an understanding or an explanation, maybe that's just part of it, of what, once the project is completed, what the potentials are of its use, so that the state has an understanding of how broad this project could be in terms of a community development.
Yes, that is part of every project that's going to be in the DRI plan has to talk about what the revitalization benefits are. So what can we expect to see as a result of this project? And that I think is one of the defining reasons why the state would choose a project, is does it have a catalytic impact? Is it going to transform, or could it lead to transformation of Peekskill beyond just that site or just that project? So I don't, it sounds like you're interested in submitting a proposal, because I was going to say it's unfortunately too late, but yeah. Yep.
The two projects that stood out to me was the Boys and Girls Club and also the MOCA. Where my mind goes is, okay, programming. There's lots of programming that those facilities could offer to the wider community, and I don't know if that's part of what's said in the proposal. That's what my question.
That's a great point. Thank you. And absolutely, yes. It's not just sort of dollars and cents and bricks and mortar. It's looking at, with those types of applications in particular, a museum or a renovated youth center, what is the likely impact in terms of programming? How does that lead to greater activity around the facility and beyond? So that is absolutely some of the things that we're looking at and the state would be looking at as well. Thank you. Any others? What?
Hi. I haven't had the opportunity to do the survey myself, but I talked to a couple of friends yesterday who tried to do the survey online, and I've clarified some of this with this lovely staff member here. But apparently when they tried to do some of the questions and things, the question was like agree strongly, disagree strongly, and things in between. With one answer, only one answer lit up, but when they tried other answers, a whole bunch of other things lit up. Now, apparently it's supposed to be that way, but they thought there was a glitch in the system, and I would too. I mean, it seems very counterintuitive that a whole bunch of answers light up when you're only trying to answer one thing. And so this might be discouraging for a lot of people trying to do the survey. They might also think that there is a problem with it. So if indeed that's the way it's supposed to operate, that when you are trying to answer one thing and a number of the responses light up at the same time, perhaps there's some way that at the beginning of the survey it could be indicated that that's the way it's supposed to operate.
Sure, thank you for that feedback.
It is supposed to be that way, and we did notice that as well. It's the way SurveyMonkey kind of works, but basically it starts from the left is sort of 1 star, and then all the way to the right is sort of 5 stars, and the more you agree, the more stars light up. So I could see it's a little confusing perhaps, so we can add some clarification at the beginning of the survey.
How you doing? I have a question. If I want to suggest on doing some kind of business with this, if I want to suggest that doing some kind of business, is this the time, or is it already past to suggest and doing a certain kind of business? I was thinking of doing an auction house in Peekskill. I think Peekskill could really use an auction house, and I was thinking of a lot across the street. But I just wanted to ask you if that would be something I could bring on the table. Yeah, it's it would be very difficult to add a new project at this point. We've just because we've it's two things. It's a tight time frame, and we're sort of down to the wire. Oh. It's the third public workshop, so the public has had a chance to sort of weigh in on a lot of ideas, and the committee is only meeting one more time. So for us to bring a new idea to them on March 18th, when they're meant to sort of make a final decision on what goes into the plan, it's kind of tricky for them to consider something that folks in the community haven't had a chance to weigh in on. There's a part of the plan that sets aside $600,000. It's called the Downtown Revitalization Fund, and you'll see it on one of the boards, I think, in Goal 3, but it's here somewhere, maybe it's here somewhere. And what that does is it sets aside $600,000 for ideas that didn't come up, that weren't funded directly through the DRI process, to be funded in the near-term future. And that could be a new business idea. It could be a building renovation or a facade improvement or expansion of existing business. So I would keep an eye out for that. That would be administered locally by the city. And that might be a way to do something like that, is to go through the Downtown Revitalization Fund. And it's a way to sort of stay involved in the DRI process. It's not, it's $600,000. It's not a substantial proportion of the 10 million. Right. But it's a way for funds to still be around for smaller scale projects in the future. Thank you.
Well, I want to wait to be called. He handed me the mic.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Okay. This is I think, a wonderful process that we're going through here. And I think in terms of where people have a say in what's going on in their communities, this is actually extremely progressive. I've traveled to a lot of different meetings around Westchester County, and I don't see this kind of openness and involvement. But what I'd like to say is that if there was an ongoing council or group, whatever you want to call it, where folks could learn about economic development, some of the basics, and submitting grants for projects like this gentleman here, where I think everyone has been sort of awakened to the possibilities that this process has brought to Peekskill. And I'm sure we all have ideas and concepts, but there's a long road to envisioning a project, to having it take place. So if there was some assistance, whether it was funded by willing participants or whether it was a combination of funding, say from the city or from the BID or whoever, that I think it would be very valuable to keep an ongoing basis, whether it's monthly, and people bring in their ideas, and different funders and people who have a stakeholding interest in Peekskill can actually attend these meetings and listen. And I also think it would be valuable to include some of these school children who we're all paying a lot of money for education. And if some of these youth can be invited to some of these type meetings, not in a raucous free-for-all, but a very civil discussion where we're learning about economic development. We're looking at projects that have taken place in other places around the world, not just in New York or in the United States, because there's a lot of value to understanding how this process works. So I would like to see an ongoing effort continuing from this, and then gentlemen like, or ladies from like this gentleman say, hey, I have a concept, or this other person had something, sort of can see the path to making this take place. And it's a long road, and it's a twisted road sometimes. So I think that would be extremely valuable. So that's my comment.
So it's an excellent point, and unfortunately we can't be involved in that. We've, our role as a consultant, our role as a consultant ends, unfortunately. But other DRI communities have done things like that in different ways, and that's something that's going to have to happen locally. For example, one DRI community that we worked with a couple of years ago, the local planning committee continued to meet. And that was a way for them to sort of monitor implementation, make sure that the process was proceeding. They would meet with the village. They would, in some cases, maybe meet with representatives of the state and understand how the implementation process was going on. There were also some ideas about ongoing changes about how different things happen here that I think came up at the Business Roundtable meeting about how different business groups and some of the local businesses could work together. So it's going to be locally specific about how that, how this conversation continues. We hope that it does, right? As a consultant who works in a community for, in this case, only 6 or 7 months, if we can get our job done, but then also spark additional conversations that continue to go on, it's great. It can be very helpful for a community. So we hope to see that happen.
Yeah, and we've seen that because now round one is several years away, past. So we've seen that one of the benefits of DRI is that it kind of jump starts other things happening in the community, and so it's really great to see. And the good news is that you have the mayor and some folks from the city here who could maybe talk about a longer term implementation or economic development activity. So it's a great idea. Thank you.
Follow the mic.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just following the mic. Yes, exactly. So 2 things. One, following up on this lady's comment. So a friend of mine said on Sunday that she tried to do the survey on her phone and couldn't do it, so she had to do it on the computer. So and someone here just said she had the same problem. So that's something to take a look at. And the other thing is someone asked me to ask, which is probably not a DRI question exactly, but a city question for Jean, is can Peekskill businesses bid on the projects that are going to be developed from this, or are we excluded from it?
You mean if
the future projects that go ahead
a building development project, could a local construction firm or architecture firm or something bid on it? There's certainly no restriction against that from DRI. One thing that we've talked about in the Downtown Revitalization Fund is actually having a preference for local hiring. I think the city has worked on that in the past. It's hard to have a requirement for local hiring because if you don't have, if you happen to not have the right kind of business locally, then it could put a project sponsor in a bind. But certainly having even a preference for local hiring of employees and businesses, I think is something that would be encouraged, certainly not prevented. Oh.
I have the mic.
Okay.
My name's Vic. Yeah, I just want to say thank you too for the process that you've been doing over the past several months. And so I echo this gentleman's sentiments in front of me who expressed your effort to be open and engage the community. I know it hasn't always been smooth sailing, I guess. It's been a learning process for everybody in some respects. But I know you've reached out to other members of the community. So I think your efforts have been appreciated. I do have a couple of questions about the survey. For those who do the hard copy, the date in which the survey must be completed is the 13th. Those who do the hard copy, where do you hand it over, especially if you're not attending this meeting?
Bring it back to City Hall, care of Gene Friedman. Yep, right? Yep.
Oh, really? That's Gene Friedman right there? City?
Or to the mayor's office as well.
All right, City Hall?
Yeah,
all right.
City Hall. Yeah.
I'm going to write that down so I can let folks know.
Yeah, please.
But the other thing, too, would you want the survey to be distributed in, various areas of the community? For example, I was thinking, well, I'd take some with me, take it to a couple of the local churches so they, the congregations have access.
Please do.
But then I realized there are quite a few pages here. I don't know if I have, I don't know if I want to spend money making, say, 100 copies or anything like that. Is there a way to make multiple copies so that anyone who wants to can distribute them?
So we left a stack here tonight, so feel free to grab some of those. We've also we sent a bunch to Jean, so she's got additional hard copies, and at the library. Okay. So at the clerk's office. Thank you. If Jean will let us know if those run out, and we'll send more. So please, that's why we have the hard copies available is so that they can get out to the community for folks who aren't online. So please help us out. That'd be great.
So some of us could go to Jean's office then, pick up copies, and then take them to our churches and clubs and coffee houses and distribute them and allow people to have access. All right. Well, thank you, Jean, and thank you, Simon.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, regarding the survey, I wanted to see if I could take a stack to the senior nutritional program or the senior club. Like tomorrow, for example, is the big birthday celebration for February, so there's usually about 80 seniors that come to that, and that's a population where many may not be able to respond on the phone. I had questions trying to fill out the survey myself on the phone, so you'll see in my comments, I tried to detail it. So I don't know if I can go by and... Okay, that's what I'll do. But my other question is on the public art. It seems to be like a hodgepodge, and I think what is needed in Peekskill is like a public art commission. So my questions are, who is going to select the art? What is the criteria for the selection? Is it curated by art curators? Is it blind, or can your spouse, your significant other, your sibling submit artwork because they know you're on the committee? Because the public artwork will be here like forever. So I think it's really important to ask more detailed questions, like in our building at the Lofts, there's a controversy over either a middle school or high school student art sculpture that's placed in our gallery permanently, and the other artists are adults and they're professionals, and they don't necessarily want to show their work with student work. And I know this came up at the meeting of the local committee the other night from one of, I think, the school board members. So that's another question. And then I read on ArtNet, there's a building in San Francisco where very famous murals were placed. One was by Banksy, and it was painted over. So my question is, for the murals, will they be on public buildings, or how can you guarantee that a developer won't come in, purchase the building, and paint over the mural? So my questions are really, can we get some more information on who's going to make the selection and how to get qualified people on the selection committee?
Yeah, so those are all good questions, and I think that they're mostly details that the groups that have submitted that project have addressed already, and so I'll go through some of them just to clarify a few things. So I think the first one is that the goal, the intention, is to set up some kind of ongoing committee or commission and have it live beyond implementing the DRI project. That's not a DRI project to set that up. So hopefully that happens, but it's not the work of the DRI plan to do that. The committee that the groups have talked about setting up would include representatives of different art groups in the city, representatives of the Common Council, so that it's representatives of the Peekskill Arts Alliance and other different groups around the city, but also there's city representation as well to keep that consistency. The distribution of DRI funds, there are specific sites identified on the map. You can see them. There's been a lot of thought put into those sites and themes that relate to those sites, so that each piece of art is telling a story about Peekskill's history. So there has been a good deal of thought and care gone into that. And the final piece is that the pieces would be selected through an RFP process by that committee, by that commission. So it's not one person, it's not a friend of a friend, it's a group that would make those decisions.
And I think one of your other questions was public or private properties. So they're both, but whatever the private properties are, the sponsor that submitted this application has already made contact with those property owners. I think in most cases has already gotten permission, or at least has initiated the conversation. So generally it would be public unless it's on a private building or property, and that's with the permission of the property owner.
Yeah, the suggestion at the local planning committee meeting that was referenced was could there be an aspect of this selection process that is also open to local school students who are involved in the arts. I think the sponsors of the project are open to that. I think it's a great idea to include some of the local talent that you have. But that's going to be a decision that's up to the selection committee about what specific pieces get chosen.
Hi, Jennifer Brown, the Executive Director of the Field Library. Could somebody please tell me where the surveys in the library are? This is the first I'm hearing about it. Okay, the front desk is not the director. Okay, thank you.
Hi. I know we had a lot of technical questions about the survey, but I think the bigger picture also is how influential are our responses going to be in your decision making? Because we have, you said hundreds and now potentially thousands of responses. And I know it's not necessarily a vote, but if something is overwhelmingly has a positive or negative response, and you have to work through the funding to see if it can be done anyway. That was my first question. Yeah, so I guess I can ask you,
Yeah,
very influential, somewhat influential.
Yeah, let me answer that, and then if you've got another question, you can ask the second one. So the public survey is one data point, right? The local planning committee is looking at all of those criteria that I had on that slide before, and public support is one of them. We've heard about these projects at public workshops like this one, at those early on pop-up events that we held. So we've gotten a lot of information about the projects and about what projects have public support throughout the process. But now we're sort of down to having to make a final cut and get to that final list, and it's more information that the committee can use. If they're on the fence between two projects, it could help them make a decision about going one direction or another on a project.
And it's also a part of the state's decision-making, too. So after the planning committee makes their decision on the final list and it goes into the plan and the plan goes up to the state is going to have to, they're not going to be able to fund everything, most likely. The committee is going to recommend projects, because we're encouraging them to do that, beyond the $10 million, right? So more money than the $10 million. Then the state has to make some hard decisions, too. And if they see in the plan that this is a project that had really strong support, it was documented in the survey, it was documented at the workshops, that's something that they will consider. We actually had a call earlier today with the state representative, and he was saying that that really helps them understand, look, this is something that's really important to the community. It was also recommended by the LPC, but the community really cares deeply about it. So it's an important data point for them as well.
And, other questions or comments? Oh, John, and then up here. Yeah.
I had a question that was for the idea of local companies working on these projects. I know that you guys are probably long gone when this happens, but in your experience, and I'm sure you have it, what is the process for local guys that is it RFP process? Like, can you just speak a little bit to that for the people that are in the room that might be interested in working on all these exciting projects?
So it depends on the project, and it depends on the sponsor. If it's a private development project, then a private developer can pick their team, however they like, as long as they're complying with the state's requirement, MWB requirements, and so on. If it's a public project that the city is sponsoring, the city has its own procurement policies and would follow the same procurement policies that it does. Correct. Correct. Yep. Up here. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Hi, Elizabeth McCorvey, Executive Director of the Family Resource. Please vote 5C for our Scattered Sites project. And then two things. If this group cuts back, all of the projects are really good. If you cut back the budget for each one, then I think that all of them could be feasible, because I think you have maybe about 3 downtown that's dealing with housing like we are and what we do. And then the last question that I want to ask you is, will we be able to see what the results, and when will we be able to see what the people voted on?
So the survey, I got a question about this earlier tonight as well. So that's I'm glad you brought that up, Elizabeth. So the survey closes on March 13th. The reason we had it close on that date is because we wanted to give ourselves a couple of days, not much, to have a summary of the survey at the final committee meeting on March 18th. I don't want to promise that we'll have anything online before the 18th, because we're going to be scrambling to get ready for that meeting. But that week, maybe later that week, we'll get the survey results online so that everyone can see.
And they'll be shared with the committee.
And they'll be shared.
Those should be shared with the committee at the meeting, which is a public meeting as well.
In the back, and then second row.
Hi there. You had mentioned that you said the state probably won't fund everything. Does that mean you'll go in with over $10 million? And ask. All right.
Yeah. So let me clarify that. So what the state directs us to do is to work with the LPC to put together a plan that has over $10 million. The target is around 12 million. It's not a hard and fast. It could be a little less. It could be a little bit more. The reason for that is, say we've got a project that seems like it's DRI ready. It's got site control. It's got all of its other funding locked up. It's shovel ready. It goes in the DRI plan, and for whatever reason, the other funding sources fall through, or they thought they were going to be able to acquire property and then they can't. You want to make sure that there's a buffer so that if something like that happens, you don't leave money on the table. If you went in exactly at 9.7 million, a project falls through, there's no way for the state to shoehorn another project into the plan. So what that means is that what goes up to the state is a plan with about $12 million in it, plus or minus, and then the state is going to make a final decision over the summertime about what gets funded. So that means that something in the plan is not going to receive funding, but there's not going to be a project, but they're not going to add new projects to the list of what gets funded, right? So that final announcement is going to happen sometime over the summer.
Yes, hi. So I think a big issue over the years that I've felt is to help bring people into the downtown Peekskill, and the issue is where to get more people to take the train and then be able to access the village of Peekskill. And I think the ride program is excellent because that will help transport people up into the village. So I was wondering, and this may not be part of the DRI, or has it been considered? I know that at one point there was a pedestrian bridge considered because we have the beautiful walkway along the river, so people take the train, and instead of just going up over Hudson Street over the railroad, which is an obstacle, if you had other accesses point where they can easily walk, get over the train tracks, and then walk into town. I think that would help bring more people into the village to enjoy everything.
Do you mean like the north end of Peekskill
Yeah, like by the
toward-
linking. I
toward-
know at one point and I don't know if this wasn't logistically possible, they thought about a little pedestrian bridge. Because I think that, you have the beautiful walkway, and that will help people. They could walk from the train and, up into the village and so forth.
The thing that or the idea that we were familiar with from working on the waterfront plan back in 2014, 2015 was a pedestrian bridge over train tracks, the north end of Peekskill Landing, so that you could continue that waterfront walkway up toward Ainsville Creek. The problem with that, it's a great idea, right? I think everyone would love that idea. Probably cost more than the $10 million that you had here with DRI. You got to get Metro North on board, MTA on board, and it's going to have elevators.
It's complicated.
That's a 50, maybe not 50. That's a long-term project.
Okay.
So it's a great idea or a great example of an excellent project that's not right for DRI because of those factors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. A couple back here. Yeah. I don't know who was first among the two of you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment, kind of an observation, is that when we look at the number of these projects, there is sometimes overlap, which is a good thing. So I just wanted to point out, no matter whose projects are accepted in this process, this is just the beginning. But also just like to say that, we don't need 5 art centers in Peekskill. It would be nice to have 2. Because, there were people that told me when there were different coffee houses, Peekskill could never have the business for 3 coffee houses. Well, we have 3 coffee houses. So there's a lot of diversity and there's a lot of overlap. So, I'm just kind of mentioning this as an observation. If the library doesn't get the expansion, have an art center, and there's an art center somewhere else, it's good, because if it benefits the general population in Peekskill, then all boats rise. So I'm just, an observation for patience. If this particular project you had in mind doesn't get done, don't feel like, you're turned out and, oh my God, what a disappointment, because there's quite a bit of overlap. There might be another group that's doing something similar or has plans to do something similar. So I just wanted to make that observation, okay?
I just got one more comment. The gentleman over there about mentioned the access way to get to Peekskill. I just want to add to that, if they were to do something like that, of course it says go to a planning board, but I just want to throw it out there. I think an escalator would be better. But maybe I was thinking maybe behind where the old firehouse that they knocked down underneath the bridge. That would be perfect, because the problem with a lot of Peekskillians from the train station getting to Midtown is because of the hill. Right. So if you were to build an escalator from where the old firehouse that they took down was under the bridge up to South Central, then they can walk up there from there. Escalator. Just an idea.
Thank you.
And another thing I want to say, because I was thinking about the auction house thing, if we had artwork that was valuable or wanted to be auctioned off, that would be, if we did have a good auction house in Peekskill, a lot of those it doesn't have to be cars, it could be anything of value. That would be an excellent thing. For example, auction off a piece of artwork that is, probably worth, decent money depending on what I want to pay. And that brings in a lot of money into Peekskill. So I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Great, thank you. Okay, yeah.
Hi, everybody.
What happens, for example, if the city gets funding for a DRI project and they go over the budget for the project? And what about the long-term costs to the city for the project, which are not initially really considered?
So we have been, some of our ongoing conversations with the city have been about making sure that what ends up in the plan considers those long-term costs. So that's on our minds. On your first question, the answer is that the state is not going to increase the amount of money that they give to a project. This is something that's going on in one of the communities that we worked with upstate a couple of years ago, where we had a cost estimate. We thought it was reasonable. They hired designers who came up with a more detailed design, and they came up with a design that was more expensive, and so they're having to trim that project back and make sure that they come in on budget, or they'll have to come up with other funding sources. But it's a hard truth. If you know, we're doing on the public projects sort of a conceptual design. It's what we have the capacity to do in this amount of time. When the city or a private project sponsor hires you know, their designer to do more detailed design, it's going to have more specific costs. It's going to have firmer costs, and they're going to have a budget to work within.
Yes, and all that's true. I just want to be clear that we are coming up with detailed cost estimates for the public projects. We have a cost estimator or an engineer on our team, and we're trying to bake in some of those conservative numbers to give a cushion just in case things go. Everybody knows that things always come in a little bit higher than we hoped, so we're trying to make sure that those projects have a little bit of cushion.
Other questions? Well, if there aren't any more questions, we're happy to stick around and talk to folks one-on-one.
Take the survey?
Yeah, please take the survey. There's a couple of laptops in the back. For those who wanted hard copies of the survey, they're on the table in the back, so feel free to take those as well. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Mayor, do you want to do a closing? All right, thank you all.